Jason, this is a real honor to have you here in Des Moines, Iowa. When was the last time you were in Iowa?
This would be the first time.
Really? The first time ever?
First that I know.
All right. Welcome to Iowa, then. Welcome to Iowa.
Good to be here.
Very nice.
The people are very nice.
Iowa nice, as you said.
Nice.
You
it's a thing.
What's that?
It's an actual thing, Iowa nice.
Well, and I think there's more communities that are also give first, right? But I think that's one of the key things of Iowa is that we're asking how we can help versus what I can get. And so there's a lot of neat things happening here in Iowa, here in Des Moines, and within the Midwest. I'm curious, how do you view the Iowa ecosystem as a whole?
Yeah, I don't think too much about any individual ecosystem out there. My belief is a great entrepreneur can come from anywhere, and they frequently do. So I grew up in New York and lived there for the first 30 years of my life, spent 10 years in Los Angeles and lived in the Bay Area, San Francisco for the last 4. So it's not like I'm a diehard Silicon Valley person, but all the great entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley came from somewhere else. And so that should tell you something. Now, there happens to be a massive amount of infrastructure there. So while you might have a couple of angel investors here, or I don't even know if there's a venture capital firm that operates out of Iowa or not, the fact is in the Valley, there's a massive fluidity to investing in companies. And so if you were to meet with 5 investors a day as an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, you could meet with 5 a day, every hour, for 5-6 hours a day with little travel time, and you would never meet all of them in a lifetime. Because every time a company like Uber or Airbnb or Dropbox or Facebook or Twitter goes public, it creates another 1,000 or 2,000 angel investors, and some number of those then become venture capitalists. And so it's an amazing thing to see when you live there. And so what I do now is I invest in about 30, 40 companies a year, founders, early stage. And I'm trying to double that next year. I want to try to get to maybe 80, 90, 100 companies. And that's why I wrote the book and why I've been out on the road a bit, is because I want people to know that we're looking for companies, and that's why I'll have dinner with the finalists tonight, because I don't underestimate anybody. One of the companies that's done incredibly well for us is a company called Uber. That maybe, I don't know if anybody here's, you have Uber here? And when I knew the founder through his first 2 companies, and his name is Travis, and we're friends. I was used to be a journalist, and his first company was Scour, which was sort of like a Napster-like company, except it let you peer-to-peer share any file. And when I met him, he was in his 20s, and I was in my late 20s, a couple years older than him. And he was being sued for $250 billion by the movie studios. And then after that, he did a company called Red Swoosh, which did okay. It was like a single or double. But he wasn't particularly thought of as Travis today or Uber today or Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. And when I met Elon, he was, nobody really knew who he was. We'd go out to dinner. People would come up and ask if I would take a selfie, or, they'd tell me they like my podcast, and they'd say, "Who's your friend?"
Oh, with
say,
Elon,
his name is Elon.
right next to you? That's
yeah,
great.
and I'd say, "Oh, it's my friend Elon." And sure enough, we see how both of those stories came out. These are 2 of the people who have changed everything. So you can't underestimate anybody. And as an example of that, a couple of years ago, somebody emailed me and said, I really love your podcast. I have a podcast called This Week in Startups that I've been doing for 9 years, over 800 episodes. I do it twice a week. And he was in Hong Kong, and he said, I know you don't like long emails, so here's a video of my product. And I clicked it, and it was a robotic arm making coffee. And I wrote back to him, "Is this a joke?" And he said, "No, it's not a joke. I built it for my senior thesis." Very similar to the products we saw today. And I said, "That's incredible." And immediately in my mind, I just said, well, Starbucks has to spend, some incredibly large number on the staff at Starbucks and an even larger number on real estate, or equal number. This gets rid of both of those things, or eliminates most of that. So this is obviously what's going to happen in the future. Robots are going to serve us food. And this kid, who's 20 years old, figured it out. So I said, "Come to my incubator." He said, "How do I apply?" I said, "You just got in." And I said, "Tell me your bank account." I sent him $25,000. He came. and we've raised $3 or $4 million for that company. They've raised a total of maybe 8 or 9, and now they have 3 locations in Silicon Valley, and that company is going to be worth a very significant amount of money. And so I underestimate no one. Great entrepreneurs can come from anywhere. Great entrepreneurs typically find themselves in Silicon Valley, though. So while I don't have particular feelings about any one city, Miami, Iowa, et cetera, I do have some love for New York since I grew up there. I do think great entrepreneurs will come from anywhere.
I find it interesting that as an angel investor, you have conferences launch, but also the incubator where you are bringing some of your companies in to really help them mature and take those next steps. Talk a little bit about the life cycle of someone who secures funding from you or the Syndicate or someone that you're involved with, and what their life looks like in the next 6 months.
Sure. So I've built a little bit of a funnel. And it goes something like this. The podcast gets watched by millions of people every month. And then maybe tens of thousands of people come to our conferences. One's called Launch Festival, one's called Launch Scale. And one has 15,000 people, the other one has 1,500. And we let founders come for free. So they apply at a form. And if they fill out the form and we can verify that they are a founder, we let them in. If we can't verify, we tell them we can't verify. We can't give them a free ticket. And if they're a salesperson from Oracle or an attorney, we tell them, hey, go buy a ticket and support the event. Because just as a total aside, when I was coming up in the industry, I had no money, and I used to do what's called lobby crashing, which is you'd go to wherever the conference was, and I would just hang out in the lobby. I'd take out my laptop, I had a sticker with the name of my company on the back of the laptop, and I'd just sit there and work, and I'd wait for a speaker. And this was 20 years ago, it wasn't that long ago. This was in the late 90s, and finally, the people who are running those conferences, like Esther Dyson from PC Forum or Tim O'Reilly from the O'Reilly Company, which you probably know, they just would come up to me and be like, here's a ticket. Don't tell anybody I gave you a free one, because they took pity on me. But I would punk rock it. I would just say, fuck it. They don't want me there, or if they want me there, I don't care. I'm just going to, sorry, Mia. Do not curse. Even though cursing is correlated with high IQ, don't ever do it, okay? It's true. Be candid, but don't curse. So anyway, I said, let me just make all my events free. So if people come to the event free, we get to know them. Then we have something we launched last year called Founder University, which is for 70 entrepreneurs who apply. It's also free. You're getting a theme here, right? People look at the startups as a way to make money. I look at them as, when people have conferences, they charge them, they try to make money off them. I don't try to make money off them, because I know from my personal experience that any roadblock could knock people out. Just going to dinner or having to get a flight, that could knock people out. So let alone a ticket price. And Founder University is 2 full days, 12 hours, and we're going to make it 3 days of just my team and I and speakers and people we work with helping companies learn how to grow. And this is like the big league stuff, like how to raise a Series A, how to build a team, how to recruit, how to do growth marketing, like the serious stuff we do in Silicon Valley that's extremely hard and cutting edge with the top people from the top companies. And we watch them in that Founder University. That's kind of like the taxiing location for the planes about to take off. And if we get the sense that somebody there is a real winner, we will meet with them and tell them to apply for the incubator. And last time we had, in this class, I think, this last incubator class, we had 4 of the 7 companies were from the Founder University. So that's our way to sort of get to know people for 2 days. It's also a test. Everything in life is a test, by the way. Staying here for the last presentation is a test, right? Some people leave early, go watch a movie or something. Other people stay for the last one. And that's one of my tests. Hey, if they will come out to San Francisco and spend 2 days, they're ready. If they're not ready to come to San Francisco and spend 2 days with the people who have built the largest companies in the world, not just myself, but other people, maybe they're not ready. Maybe they're scared of being successful. Maybe they're just not ambitious enough, so they've selected out. Then we invest in them if they get to the incubator stage. They spend 12 weeks with us in that program. I won't tell you everything that occurs there because we keep it kind of confidential. But every week, I'll give you the top level, they pitch their idea to 6 or 7 of the most active, powerful, insightful investors in Silicon Valley, as well as in the second row, a half dozen of people who are in my angel list syndicate, jasonsyndicate.com, where I have 2,400 angel investors who co-invest with me. And so after 12 weeks of pitching, you will have pitched over 100 of the top investors in Silicon Valley, which you would never have been able to get meetings with if you hadn't been in the program. And there's only 7 companies per class, as opposed to Y Combinator, which is 125, or 500 startups, or Techstars, which might be dozens, 50, 40. I'm not sure exactly where those programs are at in terms of the number of people. But I only do 7 companies. Just like tonight, dinner will only be 6 companies, because I can't remember everybody's name.
Sure.
And what their companies do. Short-term memory is 7 plus or minus 2. So I like to keep it intimate, and 7 companies.
I'm curious how you got into the early days of investing. And one of the things I took away from Angel, the book, which surprised me how awesome it was. So thank you for putting those words into that form. I actually tried something new. Usually I don't read books, I only use audiobooks. This is the first time I was listening to the audiobook with the book in front of me. And I think there's value in hearing the author's insight and the tone reflections. And so
I read the book, is what he's saying.
And so it's like, I felt a little lazy, like you're just reading it for me, But it was really neat.
Actually, that's how I do it now, too. There's something called WhisperSync, where you can link your Audible to your Amazon Kindle, and you can watch the words go by.
Even better, then I don't even have to look at it.
Well, here, you don't have to turn the page, right? What you discovered serendipitously is that your retention goes up.
Yeah.
So when you're watching it visually and hearing it through your ears, your retention goes. So I wrote the book specifically because I wanted to inspire a lot more people to raise money, and because a lot more people to start investing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rich people who just put their money in real estate, or stocks, or bonds, or boring shit. Sorry.
That's
boring-ish
two.
Sugar. Sorry. Gosh.
Well, that was one of the things that you mentioned, is that
now,
your hope is turning those folks into
all that money is dead money. It's not really
Right.
doing anything to change the world. It'd be much more interesting to see somebody put money into the heart device we heard about tonight, or the socks that are going to feed kids their lunch. There's so many great ideas. So why not put some more capital to risk? Well, people don't know how. And nobody has ever written a book about angel investing. Certainly nobody who's been successful at angel investing. So I thought, let me write something that is so candid and raw that it'll inspire people to maybe get off the sidelines and write a couple checks. And if a rich person loses 5% of their money angel investing, it makes no difference. You know why? Because they're making 8-9% in the stock market every year. So who cares? You might as well have fun with your money if you're rich. How many people here are rich in angel investing? There's one guy. He won't raise his hand. He's being very humble, because he introduced himself as an angel. But there's a lot of rich people out there who are just like sitting on millions of dollars, and they don't invest it.
Well, one of the things that I found interesting that you kind of highlighted in the book as well was how to get into angel investing even if you're not in that rich category.
Sure.
So talk a little bit about the advisory shares. And I'm also curious, how do you find folks who might be interested in those types of relationships?
Yeah, so we have a long history of advisors in Silicon Valley. And what an advisor is, it's a non-legal concept. It's not like the board of directors. The board of advisors just means people you've selected to help you, and you've given them some equity in your company. Typically, a half a point or a point, maybe could go as high as 2 points if the person was really, rolling up their sleeves, maybe coming in 1 or 2 days a month. And typically, they vested over 2 years, maybe 3. And so in my early career, I had 5 or 6 companies that gave me advisor shares, and that's how I built up a little bit of a bankroll. Also sold Weblogs Inc. to AOL, so that was good. But it is a way for you to trade your services and your network, because usually what do startups need in the early days? They need money, they need advice, they need connections. And so if you look at those items, people tend to come to me for money, but they wouldn't say that. They would say, I'm just coming for your incredible advice. But they really need the money, because if it was just the advice, I would be an advisor. It wouldn't be as popular. But you can just ask people, hey, I've been the director of sales for 10 years. You're starting a company that's doing enterprise software or a medical device. I was the medical device sales executive. Can I become an advisor? What was the name of the heart company? I'm sorry. Herd Health Group. HHG Enterprises.
Do you have the .com?
Herd Health Group. Okay. Herd could say to that executive, yeah, we'll give you a point for 2 years. You'll invest it every month, and we want you to just come in and help us build the sales team.
Yeah, I just found that so interesting and a way to introduce yourself into almost the flip side of entrepreneurship. I think as founders, it's beautiful to build things you're passionate about, but I have to think a lot of us in this room would like to turn the page and start accelerating others through these types of channels. I'm curious.
It makes it more real if there's equity involved.
Right.
And then what you can say in the agreement is, listen, if it doesn't work out, at any time you can fire me and we can just disengage. And that's why monthly vesting is important. You wouldn't give the shares ahead of time. You'd say every month. And so here, this is a great way in Iowa here for you all to help each other. And if you do make a bunch of money, then you'll have money to invest. So don't take this nice thing too far.
Sure.
It's nice to make money too. Like, make sure you're making money because money makes it all sustainable. And if you don't have that, I don't want to say cutthroatness, but if you don't have that part of the formula, then you can't get that flywheel started as a community of people go work for Herd Health Group, somebody was an advisor, the company goes public, they made 50 million or 10 million or 5 million, the investors made 100 million, the founder made 30 million or 300 million, and then she started and he started, a venture firm, an angel fund, hired other people. You got to get that flywheel going, and it requires capital and money. And so we have a very weird thing that's occurred where people look at success and money as not virtuous. It is virtuous. So where's the founder with the socks? She's still here? There she is. Tell me your name again. Rebecca. Rebecca's pitch was amazing, and you're just like, wow, Rebecca is going, of all the pitches, I thought Rebecca's going to change the world the most, but we also have to get her to be a marauding capitalist.
Sure.
Because the person who has changed the world the most and helped the most people in recent history is? Correct. Bill Gates was a marauding capitalist who made $100 billion and was giving it away. That is the way to do it. That's the playbook. So you want to give all this money away now, I'd suggest taking that incredible brain and charisma and ability to conceive of things and capture the audience, which you clearly have, like they were riveted by you, and put it towards something that just prints money. Then, when you're a billionaire, take all that money and change the world. I mean, you can do some good stuff along the way too, don't get me wrong, but I've seen people get discounted by the investment community because they're trying to do too much good, and they just think this person's distracted. They want to save the world. They want to save the whales, the dolphins, everybody. The ozone layer, the food lunches, everything. They're not focused enough. And the venture community is the requirement to get this flywheel going if you want to be high growth.
Can you focus on more than one thing?
Generally speaking, that's a mistake. And if you are focused on 6 or 7 things, what you want to do is lie and just say, we are singularly focused on X. Because what we've learned it's going to be candid, always, with me. In Brooklyn, we have candidness, and in Iowa, nice. It's a good combination, right? And you just, if you're a VC or an investor, you just see all the time, people are like, I have this incredible idea, it's so working. You're like, great, I'll give you money. And then they're at the TEDx conference, and they're at Summit at Sea, and then they're doing some nonprofit stuff on the side, and then they start a second company, and they're doing a podcast, and it's like, okay, well, what about the original thing that I gave you money to focus on? How's that going? And they're like, oh yeah, it's growing like this. And it's like, well, can you be like Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or whoever and just make it go like that instead? Because the goal of startups is to grow, and everything you do that's not growing reduces your chances of winning because other people will watch what you're doing and then grow faster than you, which is exactly what Zuckerberg did with Facebook. He saw Friendster and MySpace and other people just not stay focused and not be able to keep their servers up and running. And he's like, well, I don't have my own idea. I'll just take Friendster's and I'll do it better. And the reason he beat MySpace was because MySpace was designed like a mess.
But
Nobody
you could
could
have
figure
your
it
own
out.
videos and music.
Well, but even still, they were trying to boil the ocean. They were busy going to music festivals and the film festivals.
Sure.
They weren't focused on the product. And he's like, well, I will just stay home and I will make the product 10% faster every month. Until the point at which it was like, well, using the other services were arduous. You're like, oh, it's taking 10 minutes to load this page. I'll just go use Facebook.
One of the things I heard you get passionate about as you read your own book was the way to keep the investors updated. You had mentioned about how the connection, so spinning it back from a founder's perspective, how can they manage the relationships with investors?
We have a contractual requirement now, and have had for some time now, that founders write us a short monthly update. It should not take more than an hour. should probably take more like half an hour if you have all the data about your business at your fingertips. So for Speakio, am I saying it right? Speako. Nico from Speako. And whatever.
Is that your tagline?
Anthony's not coming to dinner. I know what you're doing already. You're like, you have one extra seat. Maybe Anthony can come. I know, entrepreneurs. Anyway, if the product's going well and he has 18 months of runway and he sends us the update and says, here's the key metrics, we can go, if he runs out of money, we'll know because he told us he has 12 months of runway, 9 months of runway. So we know when the next funding is. So we can plan that. And if he has a problem, we'll know that too. He said, oh, we got kicked out of the App Store because they said this. And I say, well, can you forward me what happened when you got kicked out of the App Store? And I'll forward it to my friend at Apple, who I'll make an appeal to, because we have a bunch of other startups that are, in the App Store, and we know how to massage this issue. We can probably lobby somebody to figure out what exactly is going on and get you an answer of how to fix your program so it passes. Or we can teach you the hacks of how to get into the App Store quicker through other methods that I won't say here on stage. But we probably know where the bodies are buried and how to solve problems. And I've had founders tell me, like I email them, how's the business going? And they go, oh, it shut down. And I said, when did you shut down? 4 months ago. Why did you shut down? Because 8 months ago, my co-founder quit. And I'm like, okay, well, I haven't heard from you in like 8 months. I didn't even know your co-founder quit. I didn't know the company. What's going on? And there's no time for us to help. So anybody who's investing in your company, they're rich. You're one of 50 or 100 investments. No one investment's going to make or break them. But if you send them updates, they'll be more engaged and they can help you more. And so you don't want to write a novel. You want to keep it to one page, 10, 15 bullet points, a couple of charts. And it just shows us you're focused. And so to that extent, figuring out what the key driver of your business is, which you'll figure out in the second or third year typically, whatever that key driver is, a key metric that gets your flywheel going in your business, you want to track that and share that with them. And so you can look at it on a quarterly, a weekly, a daily basis. So if it was Slack, it might be the number of messages sent. But then you look at it and go, you know what, people are using bots, so maybe it's not messages sent. Maybe it's the number of active users every month. And it's like, well, everybody has to log in at least once a month. Maybe it's the number of people who are active every day. And it's like, well, maybe it's not the active people a day. Maybe it's because people are just sitting there not doing anything. So they loaded it because it's automatically loading in their tray, and that's active. It's not really active. So maybe we should divide the number of users who have signed up and look at the users who've signed up and the users who sent a message today. Maybe that's the truest metric. And that's what we're doing in Silicon Valley, is to try and to find what we call ground truth. What's the truth on the ground in the product, right? And if you can be honest and candid about that, you're going to get more money, which is fuel.
Right.
And the person with the most fuel, the most gunpowder, often wins. Not the person with the best ideas, not the smartest person. In fact, the smartest person rarely wins, because the smartest person spends too much time thinking about stuff and not enough time just doing things.
I hear transparency allows you to help.
Yep,
so that's great. So thinking about ecosystem stuff, I know Clayton's in the room and definitely wanted to have this question asked. Your Scout programs, I know you have a unique story with Sequoia, and so maybe share that and introduce the idea for the value of Scout programs for communities that don't have as many notable exits.
Yeah, so a Scout program was created by my friend Roelof Botha at Sequoia. He was an investor in my company. He was on my board. He called me one day and said, hey, if we gave you some money to invest and we split the returns with you, would you be interested? And I said, what's the catch? He said, no catch, you just got to write like a 2 or 3 page deal memo. I'm like, I'm not writing a 2 or 3 page deal memo. It's ridiculous. He's like, well, that's what we do. We kind of like to look back on it and see, it's a way to figure out what we got right and just clarified thinking. And I was like, oh God, it's so arduous. And this is a pattern of something I've done in my life, which is like throw up roadblocks for myself. I should have just said yes, and just, of course, yeah, great. But anyway, I eventually said yes, and I became the first Sequoia Scout in the program. And I think there were 20 of us. Sam Altman from Y Combinator was also in there. He invested in Stripe. I invested in Uber, Thumbtack, and DataStax. In my first 7 investments, all 3 of those became unicorns. And so that became one of the most successful venture funds in Silicon Valley history on a return basis. I think it eventually will be the most successful. Even though it was small dollar amounts, the the picking was really good. And so what that was for Sequoia was, if we give the entrepreneurs in our portfolio 25K, 50K bullets and say, go start shooting bullets off and investing in companies and giving your friends money to do stuff, we'll have a little bit of insight into what to invest in. So Thumbtack, which I was the second or third investor in after Marco's parents, wound up being a Sequoia investment. They invested in the Series B. They found out about the company through me, and they eventually invested, and they're the best venture capital firm in history. So it was sort of like getting, as I say in the book, it was like getting asked by the Yankees to be a scout.
Yeah, I remember you saying
it's like,
that.
yes,
Right.
sure, the Yankees are the winningest team ever. Of course, I'll be a scout for the Yankees.
Interesting.
So yeah, it could work here if you had the ability, if some venture capital firm here or some rich person said, I'm just going to pick 5 entrepreneurs and give them, 2 checks a year. They could write a 50K check or 2 25s or 3 15K checks, whatever it is, and just to get people started off. And the expectation is that we break even on that money. One company out of 100 just pays it back. That would get the flywheel going here. But you'd have to have somebody with a checkbook who was visionary and wanted to take risk and trusted young people or inexperienced people, could be older, inexperienced people who've never done venture capital, to take a swing at the bat. And in fact, with Launch, I now have 6 venture partners, and we haven't announced the program exactly yet, but I'm kind of creating my own, where I'm saying to people who've been in my portfolio, you were a great portfolio CEO. If you make an investment, I'll split the carry with you when we syndicate something. So a syndicate investment could be $500,000 or $1 million, which means they would be putting in $250 or $500 and getting 20% of whatever that increases. So if you turned $500K into $10,500,000, they would get 20% of the $10 million gain, which would be $2 million. So I'm starting to take the playbook that got me into the game and incorporate it into my game.
You mentioned Syndicate, and one of the biggest things I've taken away from the book is this idea of angel syndicates. Talk a little bit more about what that is and how it can allow someone to kind of evolve into being an investor.
So a syndicate is a group of angels who get together, pool their money into one device, an LLC, a limited liability corporation. We call them in the Valley SPVs, special purpose vehicles. And so setting one of those up cost about $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 over 10 years. And so you'd set one up to invest in one of the companies we saw tonight, the dog harness. What's the name of it? Wolf Rider. You could say, hey, we all believe in Wolf Rider. Wolf Rider needs $100,000. So you find 50 people to put $2,000 in each. Maybe somebody doesn't want to write the $100,000 check. It's too scary. It's, Wolf Rider, I don't know, competitive landscape. Will she be able to execute? There's a lot of questions, right? But $2,000, or 20 of us put 5K in, okay. If we lose the 2 or 5K, it's no big deal. So you get a group together, they put it in, they see if she's able to execute, and then maybe you do another SPV down the road for $500,000, and you get 99 people to put in $5,000 each. And so many hands makes for light work. It's a way for angels to learn the craft, as I explained in the book. If you were going to do angel investing, instead of writing 20 50K checks and putting $1 million to work, why not write 20 2K checks or $2,500 checks, put 50K to work, only 5%, and learn for a year.
Yeah.
Then, whichever ones are the best, then put the rest of that 950K into the best of those 20.
Yeah,
That's a better strategy.
Right.
It's like poker. You play poker, you gamble?
No gamble.
I gamble a lot.
No, I know.
When you play poker, you don't want to go to the table that's $100, $200 blinds, and you have to buy in for $5,000
I like
if
your
you're learning.
Jedi poker. That
Go
was a
play
neat story,
for 50 cents dollar game and buy in for $20, $30, $40, knowing you're going to lose it, or play the $20, $30 tournament and look at it as that's $30 for coaching. If I get out of the tournament in 10 minutes or 2 hours, if on average I last 1 hour in the tournament, it costs me $25 to be coached per hour.
No gamble, no future.
One of my 3 daughters came to me and said, instead of putting $200,000 into going to college, or it'll be about $20 million when they're graduating, but whatever it is, let's say in today's day, instead of the $200,000, can I just put $200,000 to work angel investing? I was like, well, you're going to learn a lot more as an angel investor in putting 10K into 20 companies over the next 4 years for sure.
you started talking about the learning process of getting involved with investing, but you also talk about the credibility that you can generate by getting involved, even as an advisory role or within an angel syndicate. All of a sudden, you've been a part of 10 deals and can take those stories and start snowballing them towards future successes. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's a hack. It's faking it till you make it. Right now, if you all wanted to be investors in the top 5 Silicon Valley companies, you could literally go on secondary market sites and buy shares in Airbnb and Uber and Lyft and whatever else, and then put them on your website and say, I'm an investor in these companies, and they're private companies. And then people say, oh, when did you invest? And you say, yeah, I invested, in the last 2 or 3 years. But you'd have those logos. In fact, I met somebody who was an angel investor, I won't say who they are, who did this exact strategy. They bought, when Facebook was a private company, Facebook, and they bought 2 other companies, Twitter and one other one, I can't remember what it was, maybe Dropbox. And so their angel list profile and their LinkedIn said, angel investor, Dropbox, angel investor, Twitter, angel investor, Facebook. You think you're going to get a meeting with the entrepreneurs here if you said that you were an investor in those companies? Sure you would. Right? So it's a little bit of a hack. You need to be careful that you're not being dishonest.
Sure. So as we've been talking, perhaps you're starting to think of your own question. I know we want to make sure to open it up to the community, and so if you have a thought, throw your hand in the air and maybe we can make this a little bit more interactive. Looking at the ecosystem that has a lot of great entrepreneurs, but perhaps a gap within that area where you're willing to put money into perhaps earlier staged ideas, or just generally, how can an ecosystem generate more feeders?
Well, bootstrapped entrepreneurs and sweat equity entrepreneurs are some of the best entrepreneurs I've ever met. Those are people who are able to take 2 nickels, rub them together, and get $1. And that's what I love to invest in, is those kind of people, because once you do give them $1 million or $10 million, they make it last. And
versus the check writers, as you mentioned.
Versus the check writers who are like, I want to build an app. And you're like, okay, great. What have you built? And they're like, no, I want you to give me $500,000 and then I'm going to hire a consulting firm to build the app. And I'm like, well, why don't I just go to the consulting firm myself then? So I'm an idea person. I'm an idea guy. So, okay, you know what? The total number of people with ideas is 100% of the population that's awake right now. And 80% of the population that's asleep dreaming right now technically have ideas. Doesn't mean they're good ideas. Doesn't mean they're investable. So what you're looking for is, and what you should do is, you should find people who want to build stuff, who have skills, get them all together and do it on the weekends. And do it at night and make it your side hustle until such time as you can save up enough money to take the 6 months off to go pursue it as a full-time, scary, no money in the bank kind of company. Or you can bootstrap it by saying, we're going to do consulting and build websites or build social media stuff for these people for $5,000 a month. We're going to plow that $5,000 in our little office on our server into this other product. So a lot of great companies were born out of consulting agencies. So people were like, yeah, we're an IT consulting firm, and then they made, some incredible software to network computers off of the backs of the law firms that were paying them to put in their networks. I worked in IT when I started my career in the 90s. So it's a tried and true method. And you want to put yourself into the bucket of people with skills. I tell young people that the number 1 skill you need to have today is learning new skills.
One of the things that you shared that I found interesting was that oftentimes as you're talking with someone, the best question will come from the most recent response. And
did that just happen for you?
That's what I'm about to do.
Yeah.
So something that's intriguing to me is if you take in a fair amount of capital, there's almost an expectation of this high burn rate. How do you balance being a good steward of an investment versus making sure that you're spending enough to continue progress on your business?
Yeah, great question, actually. If you're lucky enough to be in the position to raise $1.5 million, let's say, or $1 million, you probably want that to last for about 18 months, in my estimation, and so you can work backwards. Okay, if I raised $1.8 million and I want to have 18 months, like Jason said, that would be $100K a month, or 1.5 would be like $75K a month. Okay, what can I do with $75K a month? How much can I accomplish? So you would look at it and say, what can I get done? And would getting that done either make me profitable, close to profitable, or enable me to get the next set of investors. So if you have friends and family, would that get you angels and seed funds? And if you have seed funds and professional angels, would that get your venture capital? So you're looking at that 18-month window and saying, how much can I accomplish? Now, you don't want to just burn stuff. And in that case, you would say, well, let's say, Nico's speaking app, Speako. Let's say Speako was doing really well, and it turned out that corporate clients, Google, Facebook, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, whatever, Aetna, all these people were buying site licenses, and they would pay, $199 per employee for this software, and he and his team had just sold, 8 deals that were $20K a month, and they're making $160K a month, and like, oh my God, we figured it out. Don't sell to individuals, sell to the enterprise. This is much better deal, because they're used to hiring coaches for $500 an hour, and it's much more expensive. Then the $10,000 logo we're talking about, we'd be like, well, if I can hire the $10,000 designer to make the 10 out of 10 logo instead of the 7 out of 10, and that better logo will close 1 or 2 more sales per year because it's so dope. And if I stop and design the logo, I could have sold a $10,000 a month customer in the same amount of time. Well, screw it, I'll bite the bullet and just spend the 10K, which is where eventually you'll get in your life if you're doing it right, which is, oh my God, I never hired PR people to do what I do. It didn't make any sense to me. But if your company is cranking and you can hire the world-class PR person and they cost $15,000 a month as an external PR agency, or $20,000 a month, so you're spending $250,000 a year at your startup on a PR firm, that makes no sense at the stage of the companies we saw. But if they've raised their Series B and that $250,000 gets them one piece in the Wall Street Journal that then gets them their next investor or the next huge customer who spends $1 million a year, it was all worth it, right? One article. And if that one incredible PR person goes on vacation with Wall Street Journal journalists and they're friends with them and they go drinking at nights and go to Coachella together, okay, well, maybe it's worth it.
Right.
So you have to constantly be making those calculations in your head. To do literally had one of my startups spend $35,000 a month on a PR project for 3 months, $100,000. You realize we could hire somebody with a marketing degree.
Yeah, pair this in with the opportunity cost that you bring up as well.
The opportunity, it's just opportunity cost is, the basic definition of opportunity cost is what else could you have done with that time or resource? So if you're here, what else could you do that would be more valuable? Nothing. I mean, let's face it, we're in Iowa. Come on.
Now.
I'm just joking.
I'm going to stand up for us all day.
Listen, I don't think like Mark and Andreessen or some other like better speakers across the hall here in Iowa. Like, it's not like, all due respect. So the point is, and I'm being facetious, but if your choice tonight was, okay, we have a client in town and they want us to go and there's this conference going on, well, at that stage in your company, you got to make that decision. Maybe I don't go to the Young Entrepreneurs Conference this time. Maybe I go to the legal conference where all my customers are, right? So you're constantly making those decisions about opportunity cost. And like, there's an opportunity cost for sitting in your email and replying to everybody, right? There's an opportunity for me to come here this weekend and talk to y'all and have dinner with you. But I've made the calculation in my head that if I do 20 trips and I write the book, which is a huge opportunity cost, all I have to do is hit one Uber or Thumbtack or even a CafeX or $50 or $100 million company that I own 5, 10, 15% in, and it makes sense. So I kind of have done that calculation as well as an investor where I spend my time.
I'm curious about the process that you went through in writing the book and recording the audiobook. You mentioned in the book that you were waiting until you had this next big win in order to make that process happen. Talk through how you went about all that.
Well, I had been given a lot of offers to write books, and it was typically like, would you like to write blogging for dummies or startups for dummies or, podcasting for dummies? And I was like, I'm starting to get a trend here. Like, is there some reason why I have to write the dummies books?
Yeah, right.
And I just think people write books willy-nilly. Like, I'm 47 now. I've been doing this for a while. I'm in the top 5 angel investors of all time. I'll be number 1. got like plenty of time ahead of me. There's nobody's going to catch me. I'm going to blow past everybody who's
Well,
ahead
at
of
one
me.
every other week, man, that's a good tick.
Yeah, so I'm basically like, okay, unless I get killed in a fiery plane crash heading to Miami after this, I'm going to be number one. So I have actually something to contribute. I should write this book.
Right.
Because there's two other people who have like written ebooks and stuff like that about angel investing, and I'm like, what have you invested in that's actually become a unicorn? Like, have you invested in anything that's become big? It's like, no. Okay, well then we should probably discount what you wrote. I meet people who write books, and I'm like, why did you write the book? And they're like, because I wanted to be a subject matter expert. I go, shouldn't you be a subject matter expert and then write the book?
Write the book to generate credibility.
That's what people are doing.
Yeah,
exactly. They're like, I want to be a thought leader, so I'll write a book. I didn't write this book to be a thought leader. I'm a thought leader, so I wrote a book. I'm not a thought leader on medical devices. Therefore, if I wanted to be, I wouldn't write a book on medical devices. I would read every book on medical devices, start 5 medical device companies, or invest in 100, and then I would write the book. And so that was my just
How long did it take?
Well, I can write about 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 words a day. So let's just say 2,500, 3,000. And I did it in 19 or 20 days, the primary manuscript.
Wow.
But I did it in a very focused, specific way. I would invite my friend Brian over, who's an entrepreneur, and we did a couple businesses together, Weblogs Inc. and Silicon Eye Reporter. And he would come over. I would write in the morning. I'd show him the 2,000 words. He would tell me candidly, just tell me candidly, like when I'm being too Jason and too obnoxious or too conceited, and tell me when I'm not being, or if I'm being boring. And I said, anything that's boring, filler, dishonest, or just maniacally narcissistic, tell me. And we'll get rid of all the stuff except the narcissistic stuff.
Say,
we'll
then
double
you might
that.
leave some of that stuff.
We'll increase the amount of crazy. No, I said we'll leave some of it in to be funny.
Sure.
And then, I want it to be funny, easy to read, and so informative and packed that people would do what you did, which is read it a second time or third time, or take notes and stuff like that. And it's only 60, 70,000 words. When I gave the manuscript, I was like, by the way, I have about 20 other chapters. So either I can write an equal amount and make it 120,000 and make it a 500-600 page book, or I can do whatever you want. And they paid me a ton of money to do it, so I was like, I don't mind, whatever you want. And they read it, and they're like, this is really good. And if you look at the reviews on Amazon, the thing I'm most proud of, it's a niche book, and it did very well, but the reviews are very good, and it's changed people's lives, and it did the key thing I wanted to do was get people into the game of angel investing, and if, as I say in the book, like if it's inevitable that somebody's going to read this book, invest, and hit a unicorn. It's just statistically an impossibility that they don't. And so when that happens, somebody's going to make $100 million and go, I read Jason's book, and I wasn't an angel investor, and I made $100 million. And then the book's going to go.
Then you get to go on their yacht, as you said, right?
Well, I joked in the book, like, when you do this, then we'll go on your yacht and celebrate.
It worked for me. I'm eager to turn the page and start moving into this direction.
You're going to love the next book.
Yeah. So, that's probably a good little tidbit. What's coming next?
I started writing it. I'm about 5,000 words in. So.
Nice. So talk about the audiobook recording. Is that all done in one setting? How do you go about
This is an interesting
producing
story.
that?
So I went to a meeting at Harper Business, and they were like, I was like, I'm going to read the audiobook myself. And they're like, well, we have 3 choices for you. This person did your friend's books, these famous books, and this person did these books. And this is HarperCollins Business. Like, they're the #1 business publisher in history. They've been around for hundreds of years. And, I was like, no, I'm going to read it myself. And they're like, well, that's great, but we think that this would be the right person for you. And we talked to them, and they're so excited. They read the first chapter. They love it. And I was like, hold on a second. There's like 8 people in the room. And man, I was like, for some reason, you're trying to dissuade me from doing this, but you won't tell me the exact reason. The entire point of the book is to be radically candid and just tell the truth. What is the reason you don't want me to do my own book?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, it's very hard to do. Not everybody, some people think they can do it. And I was like, you think I'm going to suck, right? And they're like, well, I mean, we don't think you're going to suck, but there is the possibility of suckage. And I was like, all right, guys, gals, how about we do it one day, have the other person on standby. If I suck, I will know I suck. Everybody has permission to tell me I suck, and I'm out because I don't want the book to suck. And so we did the first day, and they were like, it's great. Boom. Because I think what they don't realize is if you have a podcasting audience,
I was going to say, you're doing 2 shows.
They like your voice, right?
Yeah.
They want to hear your voice.
Right.
And so I always think it's obnoxious when like somebody who's got a podcast or have a recognizable voice that people listen to, like they don't read their book. But I know why it is now, because it is arduous. You sit in a room and they, again, like, it's kind of funny because when you're the talent and the author, like they just worship you and they don't want to tell you anything to hurt your feelings, and they really cradle and cuddle and what? Oh, would you like more honey? Is that enough honey? And your tea. And anyway, I'm reading it, and the women, they have the producers behind the glass, and I'm like, okay, and so the venture capitalists, and they're like, stop. I'm like, well, did I get something wrong? And they're like, the venture capitalist? I'm like, that's what I just said. And they're like, yeah, let's try it again, the venture capitalist. And I'm like, okay. And so a venture capitalist, like, stop. I'm like, what? They're like, the venture capitalist. I'm like, what did I say? They're like, let's just try the venture capitalist. I'm like, did I say it wrong or not? And they're like, well, the first time you said the venture capitalist plural, the next time you said a venture capitalist singular, but you took the and you made an A. I was like, it doesn't make any difference. The venture capitalist, and all three of those work. Like, well, here's the thing. Back to your point about the whisper sync. When you read the book now, they connect with software every word you say to the audiobook, so it can move the word along like closed captioning, like follow the bouncing ball. So if you say instead of the, it breaks. Or if you say venture capitalist versus venture capitalist, it breaks and loses the word. And so it used to be people would read their audiobooks and they'd be like, and the venture capitalist. As a total aside, when I wrote this, I was totally thinking like angels as well, so you can put angels into here, but let's continue. You can't do that anymore. And people used to do that. They used to freestyle while reading their book. A little bit. And so
that's too bad. I listen to a lot of Seth Godin, and like when
he self-publishes.
Oh, that's the trick.
He takes 100% of the money.
He'll go off script and include a little bit of insight that you might not have gotten if you were just reading the book.
That's how they used to do it.
I see. Interesting. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, if you do have a question, feel free to chime in, Brandon. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll be selfish. So I've been podcasting 3 years, and like I heard you talk in the book about opportunities. Some of my best deals have been through podcast shows. I'd like to hear your best deals and how you've leveraged your podcast show to find more opportunities.
So a podcast is an excuse to invite somebody much more important than yourself to sit down with you for an hour and a half and answer your questions. So Mia, you want to have a podcast. Like literally, when you get to high school, just start a podcast, and then anybody you want to meet with, like, are you into sports or music or science, whatever you're into? Like literally, if you as a person in 5th grade who's 11 years old go ask somebody to be on your podcast, they'll be like, oh my God, she has a podcast, that's so amazing, that's so cute, I'll totally be on your podcast.
Sounds like you have your first guest.
Well, no, and here, as proof of it, as proof of this theory, the guy Judd Apatow, anybody know this guy Judd Apatow who makes movies? Judd Apatow, when he was living in Long Island, would do interviews with people when he was in high school and ask comedians to let him interview him. He did this over and over then, and then Gary Shandling gave him a job after he had interviewed him when he was getting out of college. He remembered him and gave him a job. And then Judge Apatow knew so many famous people in comedy from interviewing them as a kid that then he started making movies and producing them, and now he is the kingpin he's the kingmaker, because when he makes a movie, he puts people in it, and he created, Seth Rogen and all these other people. So it's very interesting, the power of podcasting. I think it's, for me, I will invite people on if I think their company's interesting and I want to invest. So it's like a front. It's like, let's spend an hour and a half talking and bonding and me telling you how fascinated I am, and then you get off air and it's like, oh, I'd love to invest in your company. Sure, let me know when the next round is. But it's also like, for me, it's just intellectually stimulating to have conversations. So we could literally sit here until midnight. In fact, we should just sit here until 5 minutes before the dinner reservation, because this is more enjoyable to me than anything I could be doing up in my hotel room. Like watching a movie is not enjoyable to me. I like talking.
Yeah.
Having conversations. So it's a great hack.
So what's the best deal that came from a podcast show?
I want to repeat it so everyone can hear
Oh,
it.
the best deal from a podcast.
The best deal from the podcasting.
I can't remember, to be honest. The thing that's actually been very, very transformative is just deal flow. Because what I've started doing is saying on the podcast, because I didn't used to do this, I would just start the show. Now at the beginning of the show, I say, hey, I'm Jason Calacanis. Hey, everybody. It's Jason Calacanis. It's another This Week in Startups. I am an angel investor in Silicon Valley. If you want to start a company, or if you've got a company already running and you want me to put $100,000 into it, email me, jason@calacanis.com, and let's start the conversation. Okay, my guest today is, and I just started saying that at the beginning, and now my emails have like tripled. And then the other day, I just tweeted, like, most investors are annoyed when you email them. I'm stoked that you're emailing me, telling me about your business, and I'll tell you exactly when I invest, and I just have a little autoresponder that tells, when people email me, they get the autoresponder, hey, it may take me a little while to get back to you, but I'll try, and here's everything about what I do and how I invest. So I think it's important to know what your true goal is. My true goal is to increase deal flow and find another unicorn. And I want to just go from 150 investments to 300, from 6 unicorns to maybe 15, 12 or 15. Because I think there's some unicorns in my portfolio already that just haven't gotten there yet. And some sold too early, like Trello, which sold for like 400 or 500 million. Could have been a unicorn.
The question was how to make an impact in that initial email.
Yeah.
Quick weights, I mean, too much, too little.
Yeah.
Sure.
The length issue is, it's amazing to me that this is not obvious, but if you write a busy person a 20-page email with your life history, you have just opted yourself out of being fundable because you have no clue how to socially interact with somebody. Like, this is crazy behavior. You don't need to tell the person your life story. So it should be short and to the point. I'm the founder of a company doing this. I know you've invested in companies like A, B, and C. We think we're similar to B and C. Here's our deck. We're raising this much money at this valuation. I know you're too busy to probably get lunch or something, but I would just love your initial feedback. Boom, like short, to the point. And I'll have people write me a whole story, and I can tell it's personally crafted to me because they reference me multiple times in a 5 or 10-page email. I am not shitting. I'm not kidding you. There'll be 5 or 10 pages, and sometimes I page down and I just like show it to my wife. I'm like, this person really, like, they've got the first 2 chapters of their book done. And
how not to do this. Yeah.
it's like I got one today that I was looking at before I came here. It was like I was having at that Saint place with the bakery. What's it called?
the egg sandwich.
What's that place called? St. Kilda? Oh my God, that place is incredible. The eggs. I love eggs. I'm going to go there tomorrow morning. No, I got an early
So
flight.
be concise, but
So
also
concise,
informative.
but
Yeah.
this guy was like pitching me on a craft brewery in China. And it's like, number one, I don't invest in breweries. And number two, I'm not investing in a brewery in China. Like, this is crazy. Like, you're not doing any research or work. So I think the more research you can do and the more concise you will be, the more credible you are.
I also like the personalization of doing some research so that you, as you receive that stuff, it's not just a copy paste to the next angel. You've invested.
That's the worst idea.
Yeah.
I mean, if you send to 100, if you have identified 100 angels, you don't need to email all of them BCC. That is, or through a tracking email, because we all have bad email on, a little thing that tells us you're tracking us, so we know that. We probably wouldn't open it if you're tracking us or whatever. Anyway, you can email 2 a day for 50 days, or 3 a day for 30 days, and research each one and just type their name into YouTube, or look at their LinkedIn profile. And, oh, wow, we went to the same college. Oh, we know these 3 people. Oh, they invested in a company that's a competitor. I shouldn't email them. Oh, they invested in a company that's doing exactly the same business model as we are, but that business model's in, consumer and we're enterprise, so it's perfect. They'll immediately get it. So people are like, do you know any VCs in this area? I'm like, okay, you're delivering food. There have been 500 delivery food startups. Go look at who invested in ones that had a great outcome or that went under, and email them and say, I know you invested in Webvan in the 90s or 2000. I know that was probably pretty painful that it went away. We figured out a way to do this profitably, we believe, and we'd love to tell you about it because I bet you have some unique insights, Bill Gurley, about Webvan, because I read that you were an investor from this 1999 story in the New York Times. So with the pet one, like, how many pet product companies are there? You could just do a search on the New York Times and Wall Street Journal for pet products or innovative pet products and look at them from the 80s and 90s and 2000s, figure out what those companies were, what their outcomes were, and who invested in them. Boom. Now you work backwards. Or the people who ran them and sold them to Petco. And so the person who started Petco probably sold it a long time ago. That person might be rich and sitting there bored and their email is empty. But you took the time to find the Petco founder who's no longer there because they got ousted or whatever, and they got their $1 billion check for Petco, and they're just like, I wish somebody would email me.
Yeah,
And they're not an angel investor. And you say, listen, I love Petco, and I've been a huge fan of yours for so long. And
Yeah, so you mentioned being informationally concise within the email, but also the deck. And so maybe talk about what catches your eye in an investor pack.
I'm a product person, so I like to look at products. So like people send me their iPhone app, and I'm like, you have 4 reviews. You didn't write notes on the last update. These reviews are terrible, so you didn't even take the time to get 4 good reviews from your friends. Okay, now I know a ton about you. And you have screenshots, but the app hasn't been updated in 6 months. And the screenshots, oh, you didn't put in a video, because you can now put videos in the App Store, so you didn't take the time to do that. And, oh, it's not iPhone 10 ready, so you didn't put the little notch thing. So you're not even updating your own app. Right now, speaking, I was like, oh, shoot, he's going to look at our app in the App Store. We need to get that done. But anyway, just give me, and then if I see the opposite, which is this app was updated yesterday, and there's incredible reviews, and they took the time to make a video of it, I'm like, oh, okay, now I see. So I call this craftsmanship, attention to detail. The people who are good at making products are good at making products. People who are bad at making products, they may become good at making products, but people who are good or great at making products, they don't suddenly become bad at it. So I'll give you an analogy. If we wanted to see who could make the best Wagyu steak or Kobe steak, whatever it is, and I just said, okay, everybody in the room cook a hamburger, and it's like 5 of you know how to make a great hamburger, and the other 95 of us don't. Well, those 5 people who make a great hamburger, they should get the shot at the premium Wagyu steak, and let's see what they can make with that. You deserve to get the chance at the ingredients, not the person that can't even make a basic hamburger and doesn't have the focus and technique to do that. And so once you realize that in life, that's when you can start to say, oh, do I actually even deserve this opportunity? Have I put enough work into it? So if your app is terrible and you don't even take the time to update it, or when I get it, if I turn it, if it doesn't work, or all the great investments I made, they may have been a little rough along the edges, but they had very interesting details. So for Thumbtack, there was really not much to go on. There was barely a product, but their original idea was a directory of people who might do work at your house. And so when you would look at a painter or a landscaper, there were like 4 icons or 5 icons. And I said, what are these icons? And Marco said, hover over them. And I hovered over them, and one said driver's license on file, one said address verified, one said insurance verified, one said background check verified. And I said, why is that important? He's like, well, did you ever have somebody off Craigslist come and work at your house? I'm like, are you crazy, like to murder me or case the place to rob it later? How do I know they're not criminals and going to kill my family? Like, no, of course not. He's like, that's what people still use the yellow pages, because nobody's taking the time to verify this. It's like, how long does it take you to verify somebody? He's like, they told me all the techniques they use. I was like, oh, that's interesting, and how much it cost. I was like, wow, so if 100 people use them, it costs 50 cents to get somebody verified. It could totally cost $50 total to onboard somebody. That's well worth it. And then if they're unwilling to be verified, you just remove the terrible people from the system. Therefore, you're heading in this flywheel of all the good people are in your system, and then all the bad people, criminals, whatever, are on this Craigslist. Oh my God, it's going to, and there was just that little nuance. That wasn't the original business side. That's not the idea that eventually worked, but that was just something I noticed. So I always believe like people who are good at making products are going to be good later. So I love product and asking questions like, why did you choose this? Why did you choose that?
So I know you're not
and
quite
traction is the other thing. So
right.
In a deck, people who understand their metrics and have traction. So it could be very de minimis traction. You could have 5 customers, but if those customers are using the product, like in the early days of Snapchat, it was not a ton of people compared to other social networks, but the level of engagement was insane.
Sure.
Insane. Like people were spending more time there than they were on YouTube or TV. I was like, wait a second, something's going on here.
One of the things you mentioned is the lack of interest in investing into folks, into companies that are pre-product or haven't hit the market. So is that still the case? And then my follow-up question is, even if that's your kind of perspective on investing, how can someone make an impact before they have a fully functioning product?
Well, you want to bootstrap your way to having an MVP, prototype, or some number of customers, right? So prototype. So mock-up, prototype are similar. A mock-up might be something that you just design, but it's non-functional. A prototype might be semi-functional. An MVP is the minimum viable product. It's functional, but it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. And a beta might be you have a small number of people using that MVP. The further you get down in there, the more credibility you have, the easier it is to fundraise. And for me, I have so much deal flow coming at me that to invest in people before they can even get their product to the MVP stage or some little bit of traction, it's unnecessary because there's so many companies right now. And it's so affordable to get there. So with the dog harness, you could get that product to market for $50K or less or $100K or less in all likelihood. And so if you can't get it there, it means you don't have the ability to hustle $50K from your friends and family and neighbors or bootstrap in some way. Maybe you could even do it for 10 or 20K. Who knows? So, and that's a product company. So you should be able to get to some sort of level of functionality on your own with sweat equity, just bootstrapping sweat equity.
We talked with John James a little bit about the value of that lead investor. Maybe talk a little bit about how to secure the right person and also your thoughts on the value of that first person who is in and has written the check and now needs to kind of fill the rest of the pie chart.
Yeah, I don't care who's invested in your company before. I mean, it's interesting to know, but I make my own decisions. And I like being the person who's the first person to believe in a company, or I like to be the most important person to invest in the company to date and take that chance. And people follow me. I don't follow other people. It's not my goal in life to be. If it was, I would be a later stage venture capitalist, and I would just, which I have had the opportunity to do, and I would just hang out with earlier stage seed funds and tell them how awesome they are and do they have any interesting companies that are breaking out, and I would be in Aspen right now for 3 months. So my job is to write the check when other people don't believe in you. But once you have somebody who's notable, it does make the dominoes fall because most investors are looking for social proof, and that's understandable. If somebody could have just invested in every company I invested in, or Chris Zucker, or Cyan Bannister, or Y Combinator, or Launch Incubator, that would be a very positive outcome for them. So it's wise to look at what smart people are investing in and then follow them. And it's a tried and true strategy. So when you do get a smart person, you want to look at it. You want to leverage that. And it could be transformative, but you still have to build the business. So it's transformative in that people might do less diligence before they invest. They might take a leap of faith. They might instantly take a meeting rather than taking 20 emails in 2 years to get a meeting. You might get a meeting after one introduction. So if I introduce a company to the top 5 or 6 VCs on my list, my deal with those VCs is that they meet with them immediately. And that's my arrangement with the top VCs is if you don't meet with them immediately, I'm just not going to introduce you to more people because I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not sending you everybody. I'm sending you the people who are ready.
Just because the social media landscape is always evolving and your heartbeat on perhaps Twitter specifically, but also kind of the big 5 or 6 and which ones you find most interesting and perhaps the new one that has caught your eye recently.
Well, I announced today the Open Book Challenge. I just emailed my list. We're going to invest in 7 social media startups with the hope of finding the next Facebook. These things tend to run their course over 10 or 20 years or 5 years, depending on the platform. And so we're going to try to invest $100,000 into each of 7. We're running it as a competition over the next 100 days or 200 days. And we're going to start the incubator class in October just for 7 social media companies. All 7 could fail and we could lose 700,000, or 1 or 2 of them could win and we could make 700 million. We'll see. Nobody knows. But the concept is to just make a better one. If you look at Twitter, they have a tremendous abuse problem. And they also now, which if you had the abuse problem and you were a freedom of speech based platform, which is what their original idea was, they were going to be like the freedom of speech party of the freedom of speech party. They were going to be like ACLU, like, yes, the Ku Klux Klan is horrible, but you have to defend free speech, and the uglier the free speech you defend, the better it is for everybody, right? This is foundation of our country. Very unpopular stance today, like what the ACLU does to protect freedom of speech. But now Twitter is sort of like, well, we're going to police speech and we're going to let anonymity. It's like the worst execution ever. Like, they have all the tools to let people block people, but then they want to like pick who gets to have the platform, and they're deplatforming people who are right-wing kind of people, which I don't necessarily agree with the politics of Milo Yiannopoulos, or I don't, but I also don't think that you should be banning people who have these unpopular right views when you're a left company in the, left-leaning company. So they're a disaster, Twitter, and it's, they can't even get spam under control, and then they're policing speech, so they're just very poorly run, I think, but it's so valuable what they created that I don't think it's ever going to go away. It's just like, it's so awesome. It could, but I love it. It's addicting. Then on the other side, you have Facebook, which is just a marauding capitalist. We talked about marauding capitalists before. Like, Zuckerberg was like, let's just copy other people's ideas and remove all friction. So an example of that was, every product decision they make is just take out all the friction, take out all the privacy, and let's go faster, faster, faster. And I said before, right, startups are about going faster. You can go too fast where you all of a sudden do something like allow a foreign country to perhaps impact on some level and or impact in total an election. Like, it's not inconceivable that the election in some of those swing states were impacted by the Russians. This is like serious stuff. Like, our entire democracy has been hacked. And maybe Trump won, and it wouldn't have made a difference what the Russians did, or it made a difference on the margins. But the fact that they built a system where they don't even look at the ads that are being bought or care, and they let anybody buy anything in rubles to buy Russian ads that say Hillary's molesting people in the basements of pizzerias and just all this other crazy stuff. I mean, even at the end of the day, the Russians were taking groups of alt-righters and wacky left people and then telling them to both go to the same location to do, I don't know if you heard that one, they created events on Facebook. Take the people from the right and have them show up at this location, have the people from the far left show up at this location, and let them fight with each other. So literally, like a foreign power, the Russians, who murder and kill people and are one of the worst countries in the history of civilization, have used Facebook to pit Americans against each other. It's never been this bitter in our lifetimes. And Zuckerberg doesn't care. And he built the system that way. He made conscious decisions to do that. He sent advertising and targeting executives from Facebook to the Trump and Hillary campaign and other campaigns in other countries to help them use the targeting. And, I think he did such a good job last week when he was, on stage and, putting on that whole theatrical performance that I don't know that they're going to regulate him, but it's their philosophy of just let anybody do whatever they want on the platform is coming to an end, or it could be the end of them. So it's pretty abhorrent. I'll give you an example. When they created the groups product, anybody here a member of a Facebook group? Okay, almost everybody. And anybody here ever been added to a Facebook group by a friend? Anybody ever been added? Okay, so it's about, it's almost everybody. They just never had to think about it for a second.
That's the value of groups. There's no.
Exactly. Except a group of gay men in college were literally this happened in Middle America, gay men's choir. Somebody's the coordinator. They put all 20 students in it. It puts on those students' walls. Jason joined the, Iowa State gay chorus. Jason's parents don't know he's still in the closet.
Right.
They outed everybody. They don't care. The fluidity of the platform is what they're going for. And remember, they said that. Whatever his name is, Boz, is like, yeah, people may get reconnected with an ex-lover who kills them, or an ex-wife or husband who kills them, and people may die because of us connecting people, but overall connecting people is what's most important. I mean, they're cutthroat, marauding, in a lot of cases, amoral people. I believe Zuckerberg is the worst person, or amongst the worst people you could put in charge of a social network. And that's why it's so successful, because he doesn't have in his brain this idea that maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I shouldn't let people put other people in groups. Maybe I should let people be invited to a group and then approve it in case they don't want to be a member of that group and be associated with it. And his response to that was, well, maybe you need to get different friends. And this is whatever, 6 or 7 years ago. Well, that's the same thinking that put them on top. So the best practice in Silicon Valley has become remove friction. And he knows that. And he was able to do things that competitors weren't willing to do in order to make it grow faster. That's the history of Zuckerberg. He was willing to screw his own friends, his own business partners. That's why he had all those lawsuits. And he doesn't care what happens to the people who use his system. And that whole taking the tour of middle America is him trying to think, he thinks you're all stupid. He thinks that you're like a bunch of hicks and you'll fall for it. He wants to go.
Media question was going to
He
get
wants
so
to go
heated.
milk. No, he wants to go feed a cow and visit a farm and then have you all think like, oh, he's a good guy. But based on what I just told you, don't get suckered into it. That whole, remember he did the whole tour of America, I'm going to visit all those states? That's because he thinks you're stupid. You heard it here first. No. I met Zuckerberg when he had just a couple colleges in it. He was the most underwhelming person I've met in the industry. Literally couldn't keep eye contact or talk to anybody. It was, yeah, and it's shocking to me that the people who've surrounded him have not been able to get through to him that his way of running product is going to lead to unintended consequences. I mean, can you imagine you build something and it potentially, and I'm sure I know I'm in a red state, right? It's a red state? Is that
I don't talk politics.
But is it a red state? I don't know. Purple state, good. Anyway, listen, I don't know where I stand anymore because I'm conservative on a bunch of things and liberal on a bunch of other stuff. But anyway, to build a system where you let people target Americans based on being African American or Caucasian, if they voted for Hillary, if they voted for Trump, and then micro-target to them, there's a reason why Google and other platforms were like, you know what? We don't want people targeting by ethnicity because it could have unintended consequences. Zuckerberg's belief was, whatever data we have, keep it and target by any means necessary so we make a better ad product than Google's. And they did build a better ad target. Google doesn't allow you to target African American versus white because they know that's a very divisive, crazy thing to do. Because you could do something like take all the black people in a neighborhood and give them one message, or the white people another message, Hispanics another message, and pit them against each other. Any reasonable person would understand that. But Zuckerberg's not reasonable about it. He just wanted to make the best, the biggest, fastest growing ad network that beat Google. That's all he cared about. He didn't care where the chips fell. And he's not the type of person you would ever want to put in charge of something like this. It's literally.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
You literally don't want somebody who lacks social understanding in charge of the largest social network in the world. It is so crazy and paradoxical that he wound up in charge of the largest social network in the world. And he should be. They need to really deeply investigate that company. Because I think if they did discovery and they saw what's going on inside that company and how they make decisions, it would be terrifying to people. Terrifying.
I want to get to these two quick questions, but before we do, I want to turn it a little positive. You mentioned
I thought that was positive. I'm telling you all, he thinks you're stupid. He's trying to hoodwink you. Don't believe him.
Right. No, I appreciate the candidness, and I knew that was.
I thought that was honest. I thought that was positive.
All right, that's fair. But one of the things you mentioned was that the folks in Silicon Valley are looking at that removing of friction. So maybe spin it to an example where folks in the audience can learn how to create that opportunity.
I'll give you the
friction,
example.
Right.
If you're doing something to remove friction, and it's in your own best interest, that's different than removing the friction that's in the best interest of society or the individuals that make up that society. So I will give you a key example. Anybody here ever stay in an Airbnb? Anybody here ever host an Airbnb? No hosts, interesting. But everybody has used it almost. Okay. Seems too reasonable to have more choices in where to stay, have lower cost choices, and for people who have extra space to be able to monetize that space. So when Airbnb said, we don't know if this is exactly by the rules of the state of Iowa that you can rent your room out and how many days, but we think it's within reason. Everybody's like, you know what? It benefits me because I want to stay in a place that's cheaper and I want to have more choices and I want to rent a house and have a kitchen, and it benefits people who need to make a little extra money on the side. Feels reasonable. If you get picked up in an Uber or a Lyft in a Prius and it's not some big expensive car and you're doing ride sharing or you're doing Uber pool, that feels like it's in the best interest of people. Like, okay, yeah, they get a cheaper option. I don't have a bus that takes me where I want to go. Great. And you can remove friction from that. So when you get out of your Uber or your Lyft, you don't have to take out your credit card. It's already charged, right? Okay, that seems good. I don't have to tell the driver my destination. The destination's in my phone. I put it in, and I don't have to spend that 5 minutes negotiating that. So those are examples of taking friction out that helps society. And maybe bending the rules and being disruptive or reinterpreting old rules, which is something as a society we have to do. We have to interpret the rules around ride sharing. We have to interpret the rules around, we have a big controversy right now in San Francisco because they're putting electric scooters on the street for people to use for a couple bucks an hour, little scooters, and they don't have a law about leaving scooters on the street. So if it's in the best interest of society, if it's in the best interest of individuals, you can have the public rally for you. But if you do these things that Zuckerberg did, or another example would be a company I was an investor in, Zenefits, very promising company. The founder got ousted and did an SEC settlement because he went a little too fast. And he's a really smart kid, this kid Parker, Conrad, and I like him a lot, but he did something really stupid. He was like, taking an insurance test is like arduous and slow. You know, you take the driver's license test, they make you sit through every screen because you went speeding and you got to sit through that driver ad to get points on your license. He basically made something called the script that he made a little tool for your browser that moved your mouse around to make it think that you were watching it while you zipped through the insurance training. And he got caught doing it. He got ousted from his own company, had to pay a settlement. That's an example of him doing it for himself and for the value of his shares in the company, not for the public. Like the public doesn't want to know that their insurance broker cheated or, took a shortcut. Like you don't want to know your doctor took a shortcut on their surgery test, right? Your insurance broker. There's a reason why that exists.
Right.
Whereas you'd be totally fine with at an Airbnb, you're only allowed to rent your extra guest bedroom or your guest house for 10 days a month and you rent it for 20. Well, who cares? Who's that hurting? We need more housing. We need more hotel rooms, whatever.
Removing friction to create more positive connectivity. Very interesting.
Yeah, or positive outcome for society.
Sure.
We got 10 minutes.
Nice.
I do want to get one question in. I'd love
Yep.
to hear your insight.
Lightning round.
Have you ever invested in ICO? And then where do you see ICO
Ha ha.
cryptocurrency going with the future of investing?
I don't invest in Chuck E. Cheese tokens. I do like playing skee ball with my daughter at Chuck E. Cheese. ICOs are a giant, huge scam. 85% of them are probably gone, and people have absconded with the money. Some percentage of them were outright scams. Some percentage were delusional people who didn't know they were breaking securities law. And out of the final 15%, 95% will fail that were valid projects, so there'll be 1% will work, as opposed to startups where it's maybe 10% work or 20% work, 30% work, something in that range depending on where you are. I do have 5 companies in the crypto space that have done interesting things in crypto. I think cryptocurrency, blockchain, serverless, distributed computing systems from Napster to Kazaa to BitTorrent to now are super fascinating, and they could have a huge impact. So there's a lot of real technology put together in the crypto space that has existed for a while, and some of it's new, like blockchain. All of it's very interesting, and there could be some big outcome. It's a mania. It's greed. People are investing in things they don't know anything about just to make a quick return. And it's not inconceivable that Bitcoin goes to zero because just like MySpace or AOL or the 12 search engines that came before Google, most of the time the first technology is not the best execution of the idea. It's possible, since in this case people put so much value into Bitcoin, that it will stay a store of value, and it obviously can evolve if the people who are the miners agree to make changes, and that's a very interesting experiment. We don't know where that will end up. But generally it's a scam, and most people will wind up losing their money. It's highly manipulated. So because it's anonymous, distributed, global, unregulated, now some reverse regulation going on, it's literally like a global casino that's rigged. It's like you're playing in an anonymous global poker game where everybody's cheating. And if you are not cheating and you're not manipulating the system, then you're the sucker at the table in all likelihood. That doesn't mean there's not real technology at the core. That's super interesting. There is. But this is an example of how sometimes technology gets hijacked, just like in the dot-com era, kind of got hijacked and people were pumping up stocks, except this one's just much bigger in terms of the number of participants and it's global. So very dangerous.
For some of the folks who don't know what ICO is, can you describe that in a sentence?
Yeah.
And then I'd like to follow that up with what industry do you find interesting that could be impacted by blockchain?
An ICO is initial coin offering, and it means they give you a token which is unique to you and that you can trade with other people. You buy it. The person who got the token is essentially doing like an IPO where they're theoretically selling securities, but they're in tokenized form, and so they believed they didn't have to follow securities law. And obviously we have an SEC here who now disagrees, and they're retroactively going there. A token could work for a number of things. If we all were on a social network like Facebook, and every time you liked something, it gave the person 1/10 of a penny, and 1,000 people wound up giving you $1 or whatever the math is. We could all sit there and like things in real time and move money around and have microtransactions, and they wouldn't have to have advertising. That could be an interesting execution.
So blockchain within social media.
Yeah, putting cryptocurrency tokens within social media. There's a site called Steemit, which is kind of like Reddit, where instead of just voting things up with your mouse, you vote them up with a tiny amount of currency.
People would think twice about throwing that like in too. That'd be interesting.
So, or people might manipulate it and like a bunch of stuff to get on the homepage so other people like it.
Like mining. All right. Here we go.
All right. Some of the stuff that
Yeah.
I know.
Repeat the question if you don't mind.
Yeah, so the question is, venture capitalists are trying to get 10x or more of their money returned, and they're working on a small number of the outcomes being the majority of the profits. And so it's a perfect system for high growth companies. It's an imperfect system for slow growth companies. So it used to be that banks would give loans to the slow growth, slow growth sounds almost demeaning, steady growth, right? So venture capital is hyper growth. What you're talking about is like slow and steady growth. Slow and steady growth is something that banks used to do and private equity firms do for later stage ones, like they want to double their money or triple it. Everybody who puts their money in the stock market historically doubles their money every 7 to 8 years. I'm looking to invest in companies that can go 100x in that 10-year period. So I'm looking to go a lot faster myself. And the reason is because of the number of misses, and I want to invest in things that are crazy and going to change the world. So with the companies we looked at tonight, like the dog harness to me is like, okay, that's going to be a slow and steady growth company. It's not a venture scale company. Unless, and she mentioned this, we have the idea that this is a foothold and we have a whole line of products and other things we're going to do that would make it venture scale. So the first thing that came to my mind was Dollar Shave Club. Dollar Shave Club, I passed on investing in that one too because I was like, oh, interesting idea, kid, but razor blades? I'm in the venture business. And it was like, that wasn't a razor blade business. It was a direct-to-consumer, subscription business that didn't exist before it, so it was hard to understand. So yeah, no, it's not going to come from venture capitalists because we take money. I'm not a venture capitalist, I'm an angel, or seed stage investor. But venture capitalists take money from endowments and retirement, and they're part of an allocation that says we want to have risky capital over here that could have a tremendous return, or just return our money or lose half of it. And then we have bonds over here, and we have stocks over here, and we have real estate here, and we have cash here, and commodities over here. So it's not going to change in the venture community, but somebody can certainly create their own. And Kickstarter is an example, and equity crowdfunding sites are an example of people doing this for mom and pop shops. In fact, I don't know the name of it, but there's a website that's sort of like Angel List, but for mom and pop companies, where people can invest in the pizzeria or the dry cleaner or the after-school tutoring company. And they're doing it because, hey, maybe it makes me a 7% return a year and I double every 7 years, but it makes my community better. So there is something for that. You should build it.
Interesting, interesting. I know we're about ready to close off, but I do have a couple of fun questions for you. I'm curious what audiobooks you're listening to right now.
What audiobooks? Enlightenment Now by Steve Pinker is the one I'm currently listening to.
Enlightenment Now?
Yeah, Steve Pinker is a really great thinker. He believes that the world is actually getting much better. Things like poverty and death and early childhood death and inequality aren't as bad as they seem in the news, which is obsessed with things that are going wrong. Other books I'm reading or have read recently, or ones that I would recommend is the one. I read Ready Player One. I thought that was pretty fun, which is a movie now, but I haven't seen it. And Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. He's the guy who did Black Swan. Very interesting.
Nice. So another fun personal question.
Yep.
By
the way, Red Notice by
Notice.
Bill Broder. It's the first private equity investor who went into deregulated Russia and what happened. And it really is insightful if you want to know how the Russians think. And the Russians, the people who live in Russia, are good people. The Russians, the government of Russia, very bad people who do very bad things to people.
So this probably isn't a very good segue after you share that last sentence. But if you're a AAA baseball player, what's your theme song as you walk to the plate?
My theme song. Wow, that's a good one. Wow.
I was scared of interviewing an interviewer, and I thought that question might catch you from an interesting angle, so I'm interested to hear what you think.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. That is a good one.
We can have coffee and you can get back to me.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's a good one. I have to think that one through.
All right, that's
I think that one through. Because it has to be something that pumps up the crowd.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Bad to the bone.
Not bad.
Well, as we close things down, I do this at 1 Million Cups every single week. It's fun to bring the presenter on stage to share kind of the inspiring thought that moves them through the rest of their week. And so kind of as we close down the entire Young Entrepreneurs Convention here, maybe finish us with a few words that keep you moving and could inspire others.
Oh, inspire others. Well, there is the two greatest jobs I can think of in the world are being a founder is number one, because you get to create the world you want to live in. And number two is being an angel investor in those people. And I've done both in my career, and I've had an incredible time doing both of those things. And so, if you have the chance, and you do if you have a pulse and you're awake right now, be a founder at some point in your life. And if you can, be an angel at some point in your life. It's two of the greatest vocations, jobs, gigs you could ever have.
When work becomes a hobby, life gets interesting. Let's give Jason a big round of applause.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it. That was
My
a lot of
pleasure.
fun. Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate the opportunity. That was a lot of fun.